We're live, Chair.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Learning and Skills Scrutiny Committee of Friday, 3rd of July. A gorgeous Powys morning, and here we are sitting online, but we'll have to make do with watching through the windows today. But welcome, everybody, members, officers, and anybody looking in. You're all very welcome, and I hope you can contribute to a very good scrutiny meeting. Two substantive items today. So I'm hoping to spend just over an hour on each, and then 30 minutes doing the other business surrounding the agenda. Please can everybody be aware that we don't have Welsh translation today. Sadly, the resource isn't available today. I've apologised to those people who usually speak in Welsh, but it's unavoidable today, and we weren't prepared to spend outsourcing it and spending unnecessary money on this occasion. But as usual, I'm open to be told different if anybody wants us to do that, and we can have a discussion about it. Item 1 on your agenda is to receive apologies. We've had some prior to this, but I'll just go to Kath now just to tell us who they all are.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. From officers, we've got apologies from Marianne Evans and Sally Llewellyn. From Cabinet members, I've received apologies from Councillor Jackie Charlton and Councillor Rafe Devlin. If anybody else has got any other apologies, please advise.
Any other apologies? If not, we'll accept those apologies and move on to item 2 on the agenda, which is disclosures of interest. Short period there for anybody to declare if they have some interest, and similarly at the declarations of party whip. So we'll take 2 and 3 together. Anybody got anything to declare in relation to those 2 items? No, if not,
I assume, Chair, we don't need to declare a membership of individual governing bodies.
No, not that I'm aware. No, because we've got a
dispensation.
So that's the word I was looking for. Thank you very much. That moves us on to item 4 on the agenda, minutes, and I'm asking for permission for the minutes of the 5th of June 2026, pages 5 to 20 in your agenda pack. I'm looking to, in the first instance, any comment on them minutes or accuracy? No.
I'm happy to accept them, Chair.
Yeah, so is everybody happy with the proposal from Councillor Gareth that we accept them? Just a seconder for those, please. And all in favour, thanks to Claire, Lucy, and I'm assuming all in favour unless anybody speaks up. Good. Item 5 on the agenda is the scrutiny observations, pages 21 to 26. They were education other than at school. Thank you for getting these back so quick to us. It's really, really appreciative while it's fresh in our mind. Quickly look through the recommendations. They're generally accepted or partially accepted, and there's none rejected. Has anybody got any comments on the responses to our recommendations? Angela? Angela, I think you're muted. Yeah. There you go.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm just curious as to why the second recommendation, which actually accepts the recommendation of the committee, is in the partially accept box, because as I'm reading it, it's been fully accepted. We were asking for specific KPIs, and they've said realistic timescale KPIs recommended in September 26, so they are going to do it, and the measures suggested are appropriate. So therefore, that sounds like that's been accepted to me.
Councillor James, would you have a comment on that?
Apologies, trying to. Well, it's a fair comment. I'm not quite sure. Perhaps, officer. I mean, I did approve these recommendations, these responses. Sorry. And I think it's a fair point, actually. Maybe it is in the wrong column. Would any of the officers like to? Maybe I've missed that.
Sarah, welcome.
It may be because it says by the start of the 26-27 financial year, so we've already commenced that with the KPIs currently set. So that may be why it's tipped over into the partial. It may be around the time frame.
Angela, others, do we accept that explanation?
I
Are
was
you happy?
actually going to make that the same suggestion that Sarah's just made, Chair. So I accept it. I accept that explanation fully.
Content, Angela? Good. Thanks for raising that. Anyway, any other comments?
Just to
Good.
reiterate your response, Chair, that it's good that we're getting these back so timely.
Yep, it's really, really important, and I really do thank everybody for that. Good. Pass on our thanks, James. Item 6 on our agenda is our work programme. 1 or 2 changes to our previous meeting, a few updates, a bit of tidying up. Any comments on the work programme? No? Happy to move on?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just trying to find my hand. Just
Go on, Gareth. No need.
nothing there about the outcomes of the formula review that I could see.
Okay. Yeah, maybe that you're absolutely correct that should come before us at some point. Yeah, can we make a note of that then, please, Kath?
Yes, Chair.
Yeah, anything else?
And the other one, isn't the Prestine area review meant to be coming to us at some stage?
It is indeed.
And I can't see that.
No, we're waiting for an update on that. We dropped it off at the current moment of time.
Okay, that's fine.
There has been some issues in bringing that before us, and we've carried it over for some time. So we'll wait when that review is ready to come before us. Councillor Clare.
Thank you, Chair. Just that the Preston catchment review is question marked in for the 12th of November, if so that it is still in the list, but it's not.
Yeah,
confirmed.
we've been pushing it down the list, really. I've had discussions in relation to this. Let's just say it's not ready and leave it at that, yeah? Good. Anything else? Okay, as usual, in relation to the work programme, if people have got burning desires to get stuff onto the work programme, please, it doesn't have to be done in the meeting. It can be sent over by email, and when we have a work programme meeting, I certainly raise those on your behalf. So if there is anything, please feel free to do that whenever you like. Question 7, I keep saying today, don't I? Question 7 is Q3 performance. Significant documents in relation to this, pages 27 to 50. It's scrutinising the well-being of objective number 3. I'm going to go over to the report holder, Councillor James, just to give us a short introduction, and then we'll go over to officers to lead into this, and then we can get into some scrutiny of the documents. Councillor James.
Apologies, Chair. Struggling to demute. Yes, you've identified the absolutely the correct objective. The combating poverty objective within the corporate plan has been the relevant one to education, and there's a considerable amount of narrative in the link. I mean, I don't think I need to say more than that, really. I think that apart from making a general comment, I think that you can see from the narrative there's a great deal of activity. Now, of course, we have to focus on the outcomes of that activity and how effective that activity is being. I think it's fair to say I think the progress has been pretty good, but I'll leave members to make that judgment. But that's my view, and certainly in terms of better coordination between the local authority and our schools and better support, I think there's been significant progress. Now we just have to see the fruits of that better coordination. I think it's best to get on and scrutinise it. Thank you.
Thanks for that quick introduction, Councillor James. It gives us a bit of flavour. Any officers wishes to come in, or should we go straight to questions? Catherine is with us. Welcome, Catherine. Catherine, we'll come over to you.
Borada. Yeah, so the report, just to give you a bit of context, so the report is the Q3 performance against the Council's Corporate and Strategic Equality Plan. So the report was approved by Cabinet on the 24th of March, but is now before scrutiny. And that's in line with the agreement of scrutiny chairs, because we were going to undertake post-scrutiny of performance reports. And due to the pre-election period, this is the earliest opportunity for the committee to consider it. So the report does provide an overview of the 3 wellbeing objectives and provides commentary for all off-track measures. So the committee's role is to consider progress, value for money, and areas within learning and skills remit. So topics such as social care, housing, highways, planning, and other services have been already considered by the other scrutiny committee separately. So the report is to provide some constructive challenge, and in Q3, just to give you a bit of a high-level overview, there was progress in post-16 with engagement of over 3,000 learners and their families, informing future planning and shaping the next phase. Welsh medium education continued to expand, with plans for a Welsh medium school in Builth progressing and proposals to convert Sennybridge Primary into a Welsh medium setting. Brecon Second Trochi Immersion Centre has been supporting those as well with additional help with their Welsh, so enabling more children to become confident in the language, and some measures relating to attendance and Year 12 learners remaining in education were below target, and there was investment in numerous building projects to ensure that school buildings remain safe, modern and fit for long-term needs. But obviously the service and portfolio holder are here today and ready to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Catherine. That certainly helps. We're going to go straight to questions now, if that's okay. Councillor Gareth.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can I just ask, I've got a couple of questions. The first one is, I looked online this morning for trend to see what's happening, how it's progressed into Q4, but there's no Q4 performance measures up yet on the strategic equality plan. I'm just wondering why is that? Because I would have thought Q4 should have been on by now.
So when it comes to public coming to scrutiny, it's just in Q1 and Q3. So quarters 2 and 4 are internal only, so that's why.
Yeah, but I've gone onto the website and I can see Q4 for last year, but when's Q4 data going to go into the website?
It shouldn't be there.
Okay, well, perhaps we'll take that. Can I ask a more general question, Chair, on Objective 2, if I may, which is the one for sickness absence rate? I wonder, can that be split down by service? Well, personally, I'd like to see it split down by service, because I've tried this morning, it doesn't show me by service. And also, I think we need more detail, because that's giving you the average sickness, but it doesn't split the long-term sickness, those over, say, 20 days from those under 20 days. Because I think an average of 7 days sickness up to the end of Q3 appears to be high to me. So that would equate to about 10 days in a year. So that's 5%. So we're saying that 1 in 20 members of staff are off sick every day. So that's just a couple of general points.
Anybody wishing to comment on that? Any officers? Dr. Richard.
Yeah, Chair. Yeah, I'll come in there. Yeah, thanks so much, Councillor Gareth. I'll take that discussion back into the corporate leadership team if that's okay, and I'll speak with colleagues about it, and we'll communicate back to the committee.
Thank you.
We're going to Councillor Allen next. Remember, members, that we do have the key lines of inquiry document, which is available to you, just to refresh what we discussed in the pre-meet as well. Councillor Allen.
Sorry, slightly off track, Chair, but just on what Catherine said, Q4 will be published at some point somewhere, won't it? It's year-end data. Okay, may not come through scrutiny, but surely it should be published at some point.
Yeah, so all the year's performance data is published in our self-assessment each year. So we've recently taken that through governance and audit, and it will be going to Cabinet this month. So yes.
Yeah, no, just trying to seek that assurance.
Yeah. So the appendices does provide a full view of the year.
Thank you.
Are we staying with you, Councillor Allen, or?
Oh, no, sorry.
No. Dr. Richards, I think you've got a legacy hand there, so I won't bring you in at this moment. Councillor Angela.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I'm actually looking on the scorecard at the moment, and there are a number of measures there that are off track. But I'm just interested, the measure 306, the number of Powys secondary schools, all age schools and pupil referral units in an ESTIN category, a low number is better. So I'm curious to how we set these targets. We've got a target of 10. That's, if I'm right, about 2/3 of our schools. So I'm wondering how this meets Objective 3. We'll work to tackle poverty, inequality and support the well-being of the people of Powys. Because if we're willing to accept 10 high schools effectively in an ESTIN category, that can't be called educational equality. So I'm just, yeah, the question, how 10 is acceptable as a target in that measure?
Dr. Richard again.
Yeah, thanks so much, Chair. So just to explain there, so it's 10 of all schools.
Sorry to interrupt you there, Dr. Richards. The measure says number of Powys secondary all age schools and per pupil referral units. It's measure number 306.
Chair, can I just have a second? Because it's
it's
just taking a minute to come up on my screen, right? Let me have a read of it. I'll come back to Councillor Angela's question in a sec, right?
Yeah, Councillor Angela, would you like to develop something else while Dr. Richards having an opportunity, or shall I go to Councillor Lauren?
We'll go to Councillor Lauren. I have got other questions, but I would like to stick with this one just for now, if that's all right, Chair.
No, that's absolutely fine. Councillor Lauren.
There, I'm muted. We had a bit of a discussion about the actions and the measures, and it not being that easy to read across between the actions, which sound great, a lot of them, and the way you're measuring their success. And actually, it set me thinking after our pre-meet, because I said at the time, I don't know how you would measure those. And I thought, I did a bit of work. I actually did. In 1999, I had to go into my archives. I did an advanced certificate in educational management, and it reminded me that I had done the work on my own secondary school at that point, and it was a sample survey across the age groups and across the staff about their health and well-being, how keen they were to come to school, how motivated they felt. Now, I can't lay my hands on that bit of research anymore. I did pass, so that was a good news. But there could be something a bit more touchy-feely than but that would still come up with some data for us to measure health and well-being and general sort of school culture and ethos. It's not just the quite blunt tools of things like attendance, for example. And attendance can be a bit misleading because some schools have got flexible learning to try to get kids to engage more in schools, and that can bring their attendance rates down when they're doing some really excellent work. So it just feels like we need some more nuanced data. I don't want to make it madly complicated, but if we could come up with some questions that we ask across our schools that would be appropriate, we could actually get something that digs in a bit more to how healthy the school culture is. I think personally, I think that could be really useful. So.
Thanks, Councillor Lauren. And yes, we did have quite a significant discussion in relation to this in our pre-meet, and you know, we could see the performance reporting and the activity, but limited evidence of outcomes and impact. So it was a general comment right throughout the report, really. So I'd be interested to pick up on some comment on that. Welcome, Judith.
Sorry, microphone issues again. Bore da pawb. Yes, I agree, Councillor Lauren. There's a whole picture around well-being in a school other than just attendance. And there are lots of things that are happening in schools that we can measure. Lots of our schools do well-being surveys, so happen surveys or the surveys around mental health and well-being. So that is happening in our school, and I think you're right. We probably need to collect all that data more regularly to have a better picture other than just an attendance measure. So lots of that background work is being done. We just need to collate that now and get an overall picture from that.
Thank you. Thanks, that's great.
Councillor Gwynfor, we can't hear you very well. Councillor Lucy, do you want to take over as Vice Chair until
I was just going to say, do you want me to take over for a moment? Sarah, were you wanting to come back in on the attendance?
Yeah, if that's okay,
Yeah.
Councillor Lucy. I suppose it was just to make a slightly more broad point and completely agree with Councillor Lauren and what Judith just said. I suppose the report that's been presented today is a very high level across the whole local authority. So I suppose that's why it doesn't have that finer detail, say for example, that the Otis report had that was brought last time, which went into a lot of deep detail. So I suppose it was just to recognise that this was a whole county report, and perhaps that's why some of that finer detail you were looking for might not have been in there.
Okay, thank you. And Dr. Richard, did you want to come?
Yeah, thanks so much, Councillor Lucy. Just come back to Councillor Angela's point. There's an error in the actuals and targets of this line. Clearly, the target is not 9, and the actual is incorrect as well. So the entire line there, quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4, those actuals and those targets are incorrect. So I'm not sure if that's some sort of formatting issue on this document or not, but they are not the targets. The target is clearly a 0, no schools in a Esting category, and the actuals are a much better position that's presented in the data on the screen. So I'll double check that at its source where we input the data, but something has gone wrong there.
So can you give confirmation? So 306, which is the high schools, 307, which is the primary schools, the target for both is 0. 0 schools in an Esting category.
Yeah, so just to explain that, the absolute target is 0, but we know that because of inspection cycles, you won't reach 0 at a quarterly point, because quite simply, let's give an example. If a school was to go into a statutory category in July, they may not have their full core re-inspection until the following July or the following July after that. So there's some calculation when you consider the inspectorate rhythm, but the absolute target and ambition is no schools in our authority in a statutory category.
Okay, well, that is good news. I'm pleased to hear that.
Absolutely.
So have you got any data available of how many schools in those 2 categories are currently in a nesting category?
Yes, we do. I'm going to ask, I'll have to go onto a different screen just to pull that up now so I'm accurate. So if you give me a moment, I'll come back to you with that.
Okay, thank you very much. My other question, Chair, is about how this data helps us to scrutinise the impact of all the work, because as it was said in the introduction, it's clear that an awful lot of work has been put in place by the school service. They're doing a lot of things, but what is the outcome? What's the direct link of those things that we're doing? So I know, pick one a little bit randomly, Welsh medium education. We're looking to transfer more schools to the Welsh language. So what's the impact of that? How many pupils are currently receiving their education through the medium of Welsh? What's the target, and how do we know when we've got there? So I'm struggling with these. I could read it and say, oh, that sounds good, but so what? What is the outcome of it?
Yeah, that's a really, really good point, Councillor Angela. We're seeing the delivery of the activity, but we're not seeing the impact. So that was something, an overriding comment which came in our pre-meet and in the delivery. Anybody like to have a bash at answering that? Mark, welcome to the meeting, Mark.
Bore da pawb. Just a little bit of information around schools that we have currently in Estyn categories. We have 4 schools who are in the Estyn category of special measures. There are 4 officially still in that category, though one has come out this week, but that is subject to quality assurance by Estyn before the report will come through to us. So that is unofficial, but not official as yet until we get it in writing. And we have 4 schools in the category of significant improvement currently.
Thanks for that, Mark. And then that was in response to the previous question. So the impact of interventions, not just the delivery of the activity. And Councillor Angela used the example of delivering Welsh medium education. Dr. Richard.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. I think that's a really good challenge around these measures. So where, as a service, we measure the impact of the work that we're doing. So in our integrated business plan, we will have success criteria and milestones, and we will, with a robust evidence base, evaluate the impact of our strategic actions in our plan, and that's where we see the detail of the impact of the work that we're having. I take the point, though, that some of these measures potentially feel so high level that you're not seeing that level of detail that you need to see. We are currently revising and reviewing the integrated business plan, and we are in our next education expert peer panel doing a learning exercise with Torfaen around the measures that they use. So I will, after that session, be able to review the measures in the corporate and strategic equality plan, and at the appropriate point in the year, I'll consider the point that you've made, Councillor Angela, and how these measures can perhaps be less compliant and perhaps demonstrate more the impact. So I think that's a really important point for us as a service.
Just briefly come back to you, Councillor Angela. You content with that?
Yes, I am, Chair. I kind of understand that, but I still don't see how that helps us in this case to scrutinise this paper, really. I'm a bit... Could something have been put in here to give us a steer to understand the impact?
Yeah, it can come forward as a recommendation, can't it, Councillor Angela? That seems good. Just for information purposes, we've got Councillor Sue struggling with a little bit of broadband today, and also Councillor Bryn. So just be aware that those two are in the meeting but are having difficulty contributing. Councillor James, I'm guessing you're coming in on the previous point.
I am, Chair, although I'm happy to wait for Councillor.
No,
thank you. I mean, I think it's a really interesting point that Councillor Angela is making. We receive all these figures, a sort of blizzard of figures and percentages and targets and so on. And I guess if things are improving within our school system, you will see us with these measures getting closer to the target, or those boxes turning more boxes turning green than are currently there now, and that I suppose is in a crude way of looking at it. But for me, it boils down to outcomes, and the outcomes, particularly from our secondary school system, that the achievements a young person makes when they leave our system is a reflection of what they've experienced through the system, assuming they've been in a power school all of their school career. That's the judge. That's how I measure it, and I think that's where we really scrutinise GCSE results in particular, but and to a lesser extent A levels, because that's slightly separate. But certainly the GCSE, the end of statutory education, that's for me is what I'm looking for, where we think we should be in the general terms, if you like, but also down more granularly at individual school level and individual pupil level. What percentage of our pupils are actually achieving at GCSE that which we expect them to achieve or exceed, and that for me, I think this is perhaps where we as members have been a little bit, and I'm including myself very much in this, we haven't really been as diligent in scrutinising the outcome of our system. We've been more interested in how how things are working, how many schools are in category. Those are all important things. But actually, what is the purpose of the education system? And if we boil it down to that, and just really, that for me, that's the measure that I'm most interested in: is what are our pupils achieving when they leave our statutory education system? And we have those. Obviously, we have those statistics at the end of each school year that comes through in the autumn, and we can see how we're doing. And last year, GCSEs, we saw some slight improvement, but we're still, and I think we all accept that our young people are not achieving, in general terms, as well as we'd like them to, and well as we would expect them to in a county of this nature.
Thanks, James. I think that'll open up a few further questions, but we'll go to Councillor Lucy now.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, I guess that's part of the problem with this report in particular, isn't it? In that we're only looking at very specific measures, and they're not necessarily the measures that we feel are really important to the education service. But what I was going to just touch on again was the attendance figures. And one of the things that came up in our pre-meeting discussion was the fact that although a lot of work is obviously being done to increase the levels of attendance, actually it's not having a great impact on the figures. So it would be nice to know more about, I guess, why we think we're still not getting the attendances that we perhaps would like to see.
Thank you, Lucy. Anybody, which I'll develop that a little bit further, really, because Councillor James, you spoke about outcomes at the end of their school life. One of the key objectives in the CSP is learner wellbeing, and it's linked to Lucy's question. Actually, evaluation is very weak in the reporting references to wellbeing. So it focuses on provision. But we're not seeing measurable improvements in well-being, and also we're not seeing reductions in exclusion and absenteeism. So the lack of use of data surrounding that is giving us real difficulty in this report, really. So that's just adding to Lucy's point there, really. Judith.
Diolch yn fawr. Excuse me. Yes, Councillor Lucy, I take on board what you're saying entirely. We are doing lots of things. I would say we are making small gains across all different sectors and all different elements of what we measure in attendance. There's only one cohort, I think, who haven't made any gain at all across the year, but there is still an awful lot to do to get us to where we need to be. And I think we've recognised as a service that we need to extend what we're doing across our service and beyond to be able to have that impact on our young people and their attendance levels. So we are in the process of setting up a forum where we're going to include a multi-agency membership, in order that we're looking at attendance far more broadly than we have been doing up to this point. So we've had initial discussions with our EWS service, our flows, our senior leaders, and we've definitely come to the conclusion that we need to be far more broad in our spectrum in order to make the difference to our learners.
Thanks, Judith. That's a very honest, based account of progress. I would say the report in its self-evaluation doesn't portray that, and I think it would be helpful if that honest or evidence-based account would strengthen the report, really. Councillor Aled.
I'm not sure. Sorry, I don't know if you want to develop that discussion further. My point was slightly different, really. It was going back to 3 to 9, the percentage of 3-year-olds attending Welsh medium. But a question to James, really. I was running what percentage of 3-year-olds in Powys do access or have access to a setting that they use full time, because as the Cabinet close primary schools, and they tend to be in rural areas, access to settings becomes more difficult, especially when they're sort of limited hours. What percentage of 3-year-olds access settings to enable them to have a good start in their education within Powys?
I don't have that figure to hand. Presumably, I'm not sure as a local authority, do we keep that? Sarah, do we keep that figure?
The percentage of 3-year-olds that are attending out of the total percentage of 3-year-olds.
Yes.
I don't think we keep it. We keep the numbers who do attend, but it's certainly something that we could capture going forward as a subsect, you know, of the whole 3-year-olds, how many are attending.
Yes, no, I thank you.
Good question. Yeah.
Because you know, it's important that accessibility to services is important. So and there was nothing there that reflects that within these stats. So whether it can be,
it's a good point,
as a measure.
Yeah, that's a good point. Really good point.
Yeah, because we need fairness, inclusion, and equal opportunity right across Powys, don't we? Yeah, it's a fair point, Aled. Aled, have you want to come back any further?
No. When do you review these measures? Oh.
I've got Dr. Richard and Mark waiting, so I'm assuming one of those will actually pick up on that as well. Dr. Richard.
Thanks so much, Chair. Can I just come back in on I'll come to Councillor Allen's point in a minute. Or Catherine might probably want to come in on when the measures are reviewed and the cycle. But can I come back to the attendance point? And briefly, if I can touch back on the Estin point, sorry to circle back, but you know, the challenge around attendance is absolutely right. You know, as a local authority, we're performing well in terms of overall attendance for primary and secondary. You know, we're high there in the sort of in the rankings, but I say that with the caveat, we want 100%. We want all of our learners in school. Councillor Lucy is right to challenge us on what is the work that we're doing with the vulnerable groups, because that's where our attendance is letting us down. Those learners entitled to free school meals, those learners with additional learning needs, etc. Judith made the point about the work we're doing across the service to bring together the right professionals to support attendance. It's a much bigger piece of work than it falling to a single education welfare officer or family liaison officer. But I just want to make the point as well that, you know, attendance is everybody's business, like safeguarding. And the work that we are doing now is cross-council work. So the barriers for attendance are complex. And some of the responsibility for our learners attending school, you know, they can potentially lie with housing. It can potentially lie with transport in our council. And what we now have is a much better understanding of the barriers. So we're able to be much more precise in how we target and how we support our learners. So that's the work we're doing as a service. What I'm seeing is, because the quality of our evaluation is improving from a better evidence base, we're being more precise around the actions we're doing to target particular things rather than broad brush approaches in the authority. So, Chair, in the forward work programme, we could consider bringing forward a paper which articulates exactly what we're doing to address vulnerable groups. Because that's the area of greatest need at the moment in the system. So there's something that we can think about in our forward work programme meetings. If I could just have another minute to comment back on the Estin target, it would be remiss of me not to say actually that while this target is about schools in a statutory category, the work we're doing isn't about the inspectorate. Where we have come to as a service is that we have a far better understanding of our schools with a better evidence base, with professionals seeing first-hand evidence. And what I feel confident of is that we know our schools now better than we ever have. So while this target is about schools in a statutory category, what I'm actually more interested in is, are our judgments of our schools as a service accurate, so we can step in when we need to step in, support when we need to support and challenge, but always do it in a way that is preventative, pacey, because we've got a really good understanding of the position of our school. So I just wanted to make a wider point there. While the external view of the inspectorate is absolutely crucial, where we need to get to as an authority is we already know the position of our schools before external partners come in and tell us. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Dr. Richard. That's given some clarity. I've got Mark waiting as well, and then we'll go to Councillor Gareth. Mark, please.
Sorry, just Richard has said something that I was about to say. Through our support and challenge meetings with head teachers and senior leaders in our schools, and the work that goes in prior to those, and the evidence that is shared with officers, including attendance data, we've got a really firm understanding of where our schools are. So, for example, the school that was removed from an Eston category last week as a result of a really thorough support and challenge meeting with officers, we were very safe and secure that school was going to come out of that category, and it did, within the following week. Obviously, the cycle of Eston inspections and revisits, it has an impact on the timings, but we've got 3 of the 7 schools now left in categories who will get a revisit in the autumn. And I think officers are well placed with our knowledge and understanding, of the ones which we are confident will come out and the ones which may need a little bit of extra time to come out. So I think we've got a very secure understanding of where our schools are, and the support and challenge processes have heightened that understanding and deepened our knowledge. On Councillor Alid's point, we have a list of the Welsh medium 3+ settings, Alid, but we don't know how many pupils are in there because it fluctuates term by term. But I think that's something that maybe we could have a look at wider. And with Plaid Cymru's now commitment to extending a childcare provision and extending Welsh medium childcare provision, I think that's something we're going to have to look at, as an ongoing action for the council now. And just one more point. Our attendance is the second highest of every local authority in Wales currently.
Thanks, Mark. Councillor Gareth.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think picking up on the point that Angela made around how do we triangulate this information, we're almost doing this scrutiny today with a blindfold on, because I've just checked there's 29 measures for the education service, but for Q3 there's only 11 that are reported on. So I assume that the ones for performance and outcomes at Key Stage 4 and 5 are reported at another date, and we almost need that information. Also, we can actually look at the impact that the improving position and attendance has on the rest of the provision. I don't know which quarter that is provided, but there's an issue there, I think, that we're not seeing the full picture.
Anybody on that one?
Yeah, Chair, I'll come in on that. I think Councillor Gareth's point is a good one. I suppose where we are restricted, we only have data at particular points during the academic year. So, the measures which refer to outcomes, GCSE outcomes, Key Stage 5 outcomes, that data becomes available after exam results are published in August. So that accounts for the blank cells while we're waiting for children to sit their exams, so we can gather the data. But I take the point, Councillor Gareth, that you make that, maybe what we need to consider as a service is, how do we better explain, in the way that you said, each of the measures connect with one another. So perhaps I can work to put some explanation around that when we consider the next set of measures.
So which quarter are the performance data presented in?
I thought
it wasn't available until Q4, because don't we need to verify it first?
Yes. So, yeah, that's right. So we looked earlier at the forward work programme. So we are bringing a paper forward early in the autumn based on unverified outcomes. So the committee has early sight of outcomes, and then we normally receive the verified data in January. The Welsh Government sometimes aim to send it to us in December, but in the last few years it's been coming through in January, so that's when we get the verified outcomes.
So, Chair, I think when we come to recommendations, I think we should make a recommendation that the performance data is moved from whatever quarter it is now into quarter 3, even if that's the unverified data. And if it's unverified in quarter 3, verified in quarter 5, I think quarter 4, I think that'd be fine, because that will allow us then to actually look at the fuller picture.
Okay, we will certainly consider that when we come to recommendations. Councillor Clare.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just a little bit confused, and it may be that, again, presenting the performance data can be made more sort of layman friendly in terms of reading it, really, that we only scrutinise quarters 1 and 3. Quarters 2 and 4 we don't, and just have a sort of cross references to the timetable, so that where there's more targets than are presented, just to make that clear and easy to read in the paper, so that we can see what actually, to go back to Dr. Richards' point, well, that data is not available until this quarter, but just so we can understand where we are in that cycle, so that we know when we come to each quarter performance, which ones are available at that time and which ones we have to be mindful of will have an impact, but is not available until this quarter. I just find it a little bit clunky for me to try and work out, well, there's bits missing, and what are we supposed to be scrutinised this quarter compared to the next quarter?
Yeah, Councillor Clare, similar point to Councillor Gareth there. Yeah, no, that's a fair comment. I don't have any other hands up. I will go around the room for anybody that hasn't made a comment. I know Councillor Sue, as I've previously said, are having real difficulty, Councillor Sue and Councillor Bryn. But if there's anybody else in the room that'd like to make a comment before Councillor Angelo's got her hand up, please step in. No, Councillor Angela, followed by Councillor Lucy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, I had a lot of questions, but they all link back to the fact of so what, and there is, as I said in the beginning, there is some really good news in this paper, so I'm really pleased to see that the Flying Start scheme is being rolled out to more places across Powys, included in my own area, and that's really great news. And that the Family Centre in Landrindod is getting funding, that's really great news, but I'm not seeing how that is going to improve things. And the problem that we've got with this paper is that the data we do have is on attendance. And actually, we know that, because you've told us that you've done an awful lot of work on attendance, and that hasn't resulted in any real positive change. The figures really aren't changing much. So we're spending a lot on attendance, we're doing a lot of things on attendance, it's not making a difference. So how can we be assured that the rollout of Flying Start, the rollout of the Family Centre, as lovely as they are and as welcome as they are, how do we know that that is going to be value for money and that it is going to make that real difference that we want for our children going through their school life? That's the problem we've got. We haven't got any evidence base, any target to be able to say, brilliant, let's spend more money like that, or less, or differently.
Sarah first and then Judith.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So again, a very fair point. So if I take secondary attendance, it started when we started in quarter 1, it was off track and it hadn't met its target, which at the time was 89%. By the time we got to quarter 3, it had improved by 2% to be over the target of 89% to 89.5%. So that 2 percentage point change in the 3 quarters is quite a significant change in terms of attendance. But pulling back to Judith's earlier point, there is still further work to be done to support particular groups of learners to also make sure that their gains in attendance match the system-wide gains in attendance. So there are some improvements that are demonstrated, but it's not across the board.
So if I can come back, Chair. So are you saying, Sarah, that investment in Flying Start and the Family Centre, for example, is that designed to improve attendance? Because it doesn't tell us that.
No, I can't say that it's specifically, but what I would say is that every support that we can put in place, every multi-agency support for families will incrementally support that engagement with support and then the onward journey to education. And the support that the family centre will be intrinsic to providing that additional out of school support that some families need, with removing specific barriers to engagement with education.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm going to go to Judith now to help with this as well. Thanks, Sarah.
Yes, what I'd say, Councillor Angela, is Flying Start and the family centres don't actually sit under education's remit. So they have an integral part to play in our children's education. Of course they do, because they're ultimately supporting our families and they're supporting our children to be in a place where they can learn and feel safe. So I'm sure the Flying Start team and Children's Services will have evaluations on the impact of both of those things. And, you know, from personal experience, I can really see how they do impact on children's well-being and family well-being, which ultimately will have an impact on them in schools. But I'm sure there will be evaluations there from Children's Services point of view for both of those initiatives.
I mean, great, but with all due respect, they're in this paper. So I think, Chair, I'm a little bit frustrated, and it's just the same question, isn't it? So what? So what? You've presented us a paper that is quite difficult to read, that is really hard to triangulate against the targets in our corporate plan. We are trying to go through that. And either you don't have the answer for us at this stage because it'll be somewhere else, or it's not within your remit. So I suppose my overall question, knowing how many hours I have spent, sorry, I'm getting fretty now, aren't I? How many hours I've spent trying to read this and understand the data and trying to sort of see, well, what is it telling me? And am I assured that the way in which we're spending our limited funding on education is going to make absolute difference to the outcomes of our pupils? And I'm none the wiser. So maybe my plea is going to be a recommendation that we have our data presented in a clearer way. Maybe it's me and maybe everybody else understands it, but that's not the sense I'm getting from this meeting. So I'll shut up now, Chair, because I think I'm just repeating the point.
Thanks, Angela. Yeah, no, it's a relevant point. Councillor James is coming in.
Again, I'm jumping the queue in front of Councillor Lucim. Apologies,
No, that's
Lucim. I think Angela's concerns really demonstrate the difficulty in trying to analyse the value of public services just using data. I mean, I don't think data has its limitations. We live in a very data-driven society, don't we? Everything's about data. You know, whether it's on your mobile phone or, but an awful lot of evaluation is done in a more objective way. And there are numerous studies, for example, about Flying Start. Done. I mean, it's a national scheme that's been with us for a long time, but not available in anything like all communities. But clearly, the evaluation that's been done of where it has been used or located has shown that it does make material improvements to children's well-being and families' well-being. This is the support that it can provide. Similarly with family centres, and that's why the previous Welsh Government was keen to expand it nationally, and the current Welsh Government is similarly keen, because the evidence is there. We don't have it here today, but if you look for it, it is there. And as Julie's made the point, that even at local level we will have some evaluation information as well. But that's not so much data. That's about as much as about anecdotal analysis as well. And clearly we know that the link between poverty and poor educational attainment is absolutely clear. So the more families you can lift out of poverty, the more support you can give to them, the better the educational outcomes are likely to be for their children and young people. So I take the point that there's a limit to what we can understand about the performance of our schools and the education system from data, that's a given, and I agree with Angela. It's taken me a long time to get my head around the format of the corporate and strategic equality plan system. But I think I think it's good now. I think it is probably as good as we can get it. Although there are some other measures and analysis which we can bring in, and members have been really helpful in making those suggestions today. But it brings me back to my final point. We can do all of this analysis, but actually, when we actually drill down, what is our education system for? It's the outcome that young people achieve, because the outcome that they achieve when they leave school is the thing that will determine their life chances and their well-being for the rest of their lives. Clearly, so that's all of this background stuff, if you like, that's what this is about, isn't it? And if Flying Star improves the outcomes of a GCSE learner in 12 or 13 years' time when they leave the school system, well, then Flying Star's done its job. And we know that early years intervention does have a material impact on outcomes from the education system. So I understand Angela's point, and it is difficult to triangulate these things and read across. But I don't think we should get too hung up on that. All we can do is present the data, analyze it, interpret it as we can, and I'm not sure there's a better way of doing it.
Thanks, James. Councillor Lucy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Sort of along similar lines, I guess, again, in our pre-meeting, we discussed various items relating to educational equity and access and Welsh medium education and transformation, and just felt that we were lacking in evidence into how improvements were being achieved. So, for instance, were there transport barriers? Were some people missing out on after school activities, I guess, because they're in a more rural area and can't access those facilities? And similarly, where it's easier to have a wider curriculum, perhaps in a bigger school where there are several schools closer together, and it's easier to provide services across those schools, and areas where digital access isn't so good. So all those kind of things that we just haven't got the evidence to demonstrate whether they are an issue or not, and whether we need to be spending money on them.
Yeah. Should we just take that as a point made? Because it's no, that's absolutely fine. Where the time we're approaching almost an hour on this, so maybe a couple of more comments before we move on to recommendations. Councillor Aled.
I'll step back because James made much of the points I was going to make, really. The initial corporate strategic plan didn't have any measures from education at all in it. And, it's through scrutiny that we got these added to it. And this sort of data doesn't have the narrative behind the numbers, which is important to understand, but does point us in directions where we should be potentially focusing our attention. Again, it's, we talk about initiative after initiative of supporting certain families, but it's that equality of access to those services that I have a real concern about. Flying Stars is a perfect example. It's a really limited area, and there are children across the county who have no access to services, no access to youth stuff, and I know it's a hugely challenging position, and I sympathise with James on this, but education is a key to dragging people out of poverty. So how you can reflect that in this data, I'm not sure, but we got to try and do that to some extent. But thank you, James, for the points that you made there.
Yeah, thank you, Aled. A point well made again, and a recurring theme. Councillor Lauren, I'm gonna say Councillor Lauren is the last comment or question, following Councillor Gareth's point as well. So those are the last two people to speak on this, so that we move on to the other agenda items. Councillor Lauren first.
Chair, just to come back on what Councillor James said about the outcome of education and what they do when they, actually reach the end of schooling. I think that's really too narrow a picture from my perspective. I'm hoping that education is about turning out well-rounded, healthy, emotionally balanced, good citizens, and not just about have we actually got good exam results. The exam results, of course, are very important, and we mustn't lose sight of that. But we want citizens here who want to take part in their communities, who want to contribute. Well, I think we do anyway, who actually feel good about themselves, who have confidence, who have good emotional well-being. And so I know that makes it much more complicated to track data, and that's why I come back all the way back to where I started, which is we need some ways of actually bringing together the emotional health and well-being survey data so we can see whether that's improving across the schools and across the ages and across time. And I'm going to be quiet now, but I just wanted to say that bit.
No, that's absolutely fine, Councillor Lauren. And Councillor Gareth.
Yeah, mine's a very quick point, Chair. If I remember rightly, when I was an officer and the 3-year-old settings were introduced, I think Welsh Government said they should be a setting within 3 miles of every household. Be interested to know how many households don't fall outside that criteria in Powys and what the current criteria are. Because that's another sign of rural deprivation, basically.
Okay, that's a final comment and a good comment. I'm going to come to officers or portfolio. If there's anything finally there you want to conclude on those last comments, there's an opportunity, or I'm going to move on to the next agenda item. Dr. Richard.
Thanks, Chair. Could I just make an overall comment? Picking up on Councillor Ange's observations around the report, I think it's falling between two stools, isn't it? There's high-level information, high-level data, without the detail that needs to sit underneath it, because that data sits in other papers. So I'm reflecting whether what we need to do following this discussion is to consider how we adjust the forward work program so we can bring the deep dive pieces of work forward to the committee based on the challenge we've had around these high level indicators. Because, the purpose of this report is that high level. If it was to bring all the detail we needed to bring to be able to respond and give you the information around the challenge, it would be an enormous paper. So I think there's something for me to consider around how we make sure that we tie a forward work program to the areas which we're being measured against.
Yeah, no, that's a great assumption there, Dr. Richard, and I do agree with you. It's really difficult when we're scrutinising what we're scrutinising today.
Yeah, and I'm just, the purpose of the paper is that high level indication, is it? But ultimately, it's leading to frustration because people want to get rightly into the detail and into the evidence. But the remit of this paper is not to bring that detail and evidence forward. So I'll consider that.
Thank you, Richard. Final word from Councillor James.
Thanks, Chair. And no, just to say, I completely agree with Councillor Lauren's point. The point I was making about exam results was actually that's just one of the things. There's so much of what she said you can't measure with data. It's immeasurable in that respect with raw data. But one of the things we can measure is exam results and outcomes and education outcomes in that. And again, education isn't just about exams, but as she said, it's a very important part of that. But I was trying to pick on the things that we as members can actually grasp, can see, and an awful lot of the things that she said about producing well-rounded individuals is terribly important, but very hard to measure with data. And that was that's why I focused on that. But I completely agree with you, Lauren. Totally agree.
Thank you very much. That brings to end item 8 on the agenda. I'm now going to item 7 on the agenda. I'm now going to item 8, which is recommendations from agenda item 7. Kath has been noting down some of our comments as we go through, so I'm going to give you a quick read of them as possible recommendations, but please, if there are others, please add to that. A report on addressing vulnerable groups and attendance issues via the Forward Work Programme. Dr. Richard has mentioned the Forward Work Programme, so we can add things to that recommendation. Additional information on 3-year-old access to educational settings, Welsh medium provision. Councillor Allard brought that out. Considering how performance reporting could better demonstrate the impact and provide a fuller picture of educational outcomes. Review the presentation and timing of education performance information report back to the committee by the next Q3 performance cycle on options, providing a more complete picture of educational outcomes, including whether unverified attainment and performance data can be presented earlier to support effective scrutiny. The future performance reports include clearer explanatory information on the relationship between performance measure, reporting cycles and data availability, enabling members to understand which measures are reported in each quarter and how they contribute to the overall assessment of educational performance. Those are some notes that have been made during the meeting. I'm happy to take other recommendations or take some of those down in your hands. Councillor Allard.
Yes, and the one about the 3-year-olds, I'd like, ideally, if Sarah and her team could report back to the committee straight away, rather than try and put some measure into a future CSEP in the future. So I'd like a little bit of information on that quite quickly. But this does provide a snapshot, and I do question, we need a bit more input into target setting as well when there's a review of the measures. I'm not sure when, I did ask when those measures would be reviewed, is because that's an important element. Because I'll look at another area of council, which is rather than be a little bit too critical of officers in front of us today. But if you scroll down the scorecard, you get to 352 and all those targets on potholes, there's 100% hitting the targets, the green all the way through. But we know that's not the reality on the ground. So, you know, we do need an input into reviewing the targets at some point.
Okay, Catherine's put her hand up.
So the corporate plan gets updated annually, and that will be starting to sort of be worked on now. And in the autumn, it comes through to scrutiny for challenge. So it came last year. Yeah. So we had a session where all scrutiny could virtually scrutinise, and then we had a session with the chairs because that was felt the most effective way forward. However, we can work with the chairs and come up with some other way of doing it if that is beneficial, but there is an opportunity, as there is every year, for scrutiny to feed in and challenge target.
Thank you, Catherine.
If you want to word a recommendation surrounding that, Allard, I'm more than happy to put a recommendation in. As you're thinking about it, has anybody else got any comments on recommendations? Are you content with what I read out to go forward as recommendations? Any further development on them?
Chair, happy with those, but so just taking on board what's been said here, the fact that this is a high-level document, perhaps we should be looking at our work programming to make sure that over the next year we get opportunity to look at these measures in terms of spend, etc., in more depth.
Yeah, no, I think that was Dr. Richard was indicating that as well. So yeah, we can add that as a recommendation.
Thank you.
And coming back to you now, Councillor Allard, I've got your hands up.
No, I was happy with Catherine's response. Welcome that response. It's important that the whole of the scrutiny community gets involved in that process.
Thank you. Are we finishing on this item? Anything more? Thank you very much then. We'll move on to item 9 on the agenda. It's now 11:10, so bit of work ahead. So just remind people that we are scheduled to finish at 12:30. Item 9 on your agenda is the Scouts. Schools outturn position as 31st of March 26 and budget plans 26-27. I remind members that there is another agenda item, item 12, school budgets deep dive, which we propose going into confidential session. So bearing in mind that if you have questions, which may be considered at 12 as well. So to be clever on your asking questions, and be conscious of the fact that some of the information that will be confidential today. I'm going to go to the portfolio holder as the author of the report, and also again, and certainly no obligation to do so. Councillor David Thomas, Portfolio for Finance, is in the meeting as well. If Councillor David wants to come in after Councillor James, I'm more than happy. But as I said, Councillor David, no obligation at all. Councillor James.
Apologies, struggling again to get them demuted. Yes, so we've got sort of two reports, haven't we? One, sort of broad brush, global, if you like, Powys-wide situation, and then we've got the more detailed deep dive to come. Clearly, the outturn position is there are too many there are too many figures in red in brackets. Let's be frank about that, it's clear that although the revised school funding formula, which the Cabinet has decided, which the Council, agreed through the budget process to fully fund, and we are fully funding it, that is that's stabilising the situation, but doesn't get us out of the difficulty we are in the sense that the system is overspending, and or rather more money is being spent on education in schools, in delegated school budgets than is being provided by the local authority. So we have it's certainly in the secondary sector generally a stabilised situation, although as you will see when we go into the deep dive, one or two outliers. The primary system still in a relatively healthy position, although there are individual schools which are causing concern. And again, we will go into that when we do our deep dive. So this is a position that, for me, in broad terms, is telling us that we have a school system which is not sustainable in the long term without some fairly radical change to its structure in future years. We've been making changes incrementally over the years, but the delegated school budget position remains of considerable concern.
Thank you, Councillor James. Any comment, Councillor David, or?
Thank you, Chair. No, just to reiterate basically what Councillor James has said. I think he's covered everything I wanted to say. But the planned financial position in schools is improving, but very, very slowly, and that's a concern in itself. I think a long-term aim is still to ensure we get in-year balanced budgets in our schools, and that's why we've committed to fund the formula fully, and that's still our intention this year, all going well, but we don't know what the settlement's going to be from Welsh Government yet. But our focus obviously has got to be on Powys, and that's what we're doing. And I think you're going to get a presentation later that will show you and hopefully give you some confidence that what we are doing is correct. But it's just worth considering the national context, because since 2021-22 was the period with regard to school budgets where we had this incredibly artificially high reserve levels in schools after the COVID crisis. But from 22 there's been a worsening picture across Wales. And indeed, deficits generally in schools have deteriorated quite significantly. I think now you're getting a situation where it was 395 schools in deficits. That's now increased to 497. And the value of those deficits has increased to 107.9 million. So Powys isn't alone in this. But I think, whereas we know we've got structural problems within our schools in Powys, and we need to speed up the transformation programme. For example, the teams in the schools are doing excellent work around structural issues in schools themselves to ensure that we've got the right resource in place to deliver an appropriate curriculum. But I think potentially in the long term, I think there's going to have to be a dialogue as well with Welsh Government to address what is a deteriorating picture. That's all I'd say, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you both. It certainly helps to know your views on this. I'm going to go to Dr. Richard or Nancy now to give us a brief introduction to where we're going also, if they so wish, or we'll go straight to questions.
Thanks so much, Chair. We do have a presentation prepared, which Nancy was going to take you through.
I think, Chair, that was for the confidential session we were going to move into.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I understood as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Nancy. Chair, I think we move straight to questions.
Move to questions, I
Hear
believe.
from the portfolio holder.
No, that's absolutely fine. Councillor Lucy.
Thank you, Chair. I'm always confused about the statement funding the formula fully. Maybe I misunderstand it, but my understanding is that the formula is a way of dividing up the money that's available. So the total amount of money in the pot is divided up using the formula. So to say that we're funding the formula fully seems a strange statement.
Nancy.
Yeah, if I can come in there, Chair. So in terms of the funding of the formula in full, Councillor Lucy, that is based on a set of principles that have been agreed on and consulted with schools and ultimately then by council, with any additional funding that relates to that obviously coming through council as well for agreement. So in terms of the principles that have been agreed and set out, the council is fully funding the formula. And what we do with that is we look at all the principles that underpin how that money gets to the schools. And in the finance resource model, we apply different percentages. So when we obviously had scrutiny on the budget, at the moment, teachers' pay award and NJC are based on 3%. And then we look at any other inflation measures. So for example, premises, we would work with our corporate property team to look at inflation linked to maintenance and build those in. So we take every different principle that the formula drives and ensure that in the finance resource model that is represented in terms of a bid to council, which obviously in the 26-27 financial year total 5.6 million. So that is what we mean in terms of fully funding the formula and the percentages that we've applied. In previous years, you will note in the FRM, where there have been amendments to the likes of energy costs, we've tried to do catch-ups in the FRM around recognising where energy might not have deflated as much as possible. So we try to keep that view of what's going on in the year, whether that's led to any impact on schools and their funding, and ensure that that is accounted for when we're planning our budgets each year. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy, and thanks, Councillor Lucy. Councillor Lucy's raised something which I've never considered before, but I'm going to come back to you, Nancy, because I don't. Or Lucy, do you want to come back at that?
No, just that I still don't. I mean, you know, schools are given the opportunity to respond to the consultation. As to the way that the money is divided up, but they never, a lot of them then don't understand how it impacts on their individual budgets. And, you know, it seems to be clear if we believe that we're fully funding the formula and the formula is adequate for schools to provide the education that they need to provide, then why is it that so many schools are spending more than their budget?
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Councillor. See, Nancy, before you come back, here's a bit of a challenge for you because I think it develops Councillor Lucy's point. If the overall budget from the authority went into the funding formula, if it was 10 million less, the school funding formula would still divide that total up so that it would go out to schools. I think that's the point that Lucy's trying to make. So if there was 10 million less, you'd still fund the formula. You could still say that you're funding the funding formula with the amount of money you have, because the funding formula actually just divides the total up and creates a piece of pie, doesn't it?
And there's nothing in the, sorry to butt in, but there's nothing in the funding formula that I can recall that says how many subjects in the curriculum we should be providing, for instance.
Am I confusing things, Nancy?
No, I'm happy to come in, Chair, when you're ready.
Go on.
Yeah, so no, I don't agree in terms of taking an amount and then dividing it up. What the money is driven from in the current formula is principles have been agreed. So for example, to give members an example, in primary, we fund 1 to 30 on a pupil teacher ratio across the primary sector. So if that drives 400 teachers across Powys and their pay awards are assumed at X, that extra pressure is built into the budget for the council to consider funding the formula in full. So each element of the funding formula is consulted on. So to pick up on Councillor Lucy's point and our more recent consultation, where we consulted with all our schools on reducing the pupil teacher ratio with regards to options. So the options were in there at 1 to 25, Councillor Lucy, and the consultation set about to take into account the evidence of the current structure that we've got in our education system in secondary. And the evidence suggested that the actual ratio was more around 1 to, I think it was just under 20, 19.9 in the consultation document. Therefore, in order to fund that, we could take the approach of one of three ways. We could either apply an efficiency potentially to all schools to help fund that additional in the secondary sector. We could take it off potentially secondary, or we apply in the finance resource model for the additional funding that accompanies that. That's what happened, along with taking money that had been accumulated from transformation proposals that was always agreed would be reinvested into the education system. So we've got two things happening. We've got the transformation proposals working their way through and the commitment of the council to reinvest that money into the education system. So for Councillor Gwynfer's point as well, it isn't the 106 divided by, it is, these are the principles, these are the inflation factors, or if we're amending the principles, the amount of funding that is required to go with them. We either take them forward as a local authority or we don't in terms of cabinet decisions and funding of them. And then that gives us our total pot. So this year, an extra 5.6 million is required in order to increase the level of funding that is needed to fully fund the principles of the formula.
I think I've got that, Nancy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Gareth, followed by Councillor Aled.
Yeah, can I say, Chair, I fully accept that the current formula is fully funded, but Nancy made the point that we're funding primary schools currently in a 1 to 30 basis for teachers. A few years ago, we were funding primary schools on a 1 to 21.5 pupil teacher ratio. So, so in effect, we reduced the funding to that element of the formula significantly. And perhaps one of the recommendations we need from this discussion is to have an understanding of that element of the formula over a period of time, going back, say, 10, 15 years.
Any comment on that? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm in a bit of trouble. I'm only on one screen at the moment. Anybody coming back on that one? Nancy?
Yeah, just to pick up on Councillor Gareth's point, I would think that we would need to look back at when that 121.5 was, because I would suggest that was a considerable time ago, considerable number of years ago. So we can look at what the background data from each formula is to get that. But in terms of the 21.5, that is, I don't recall that. I can remember a 1 to 28 ratio, but I'd need to confirm by looking back through the figures. Thank you.
Okay. Content, Gareth?
Yeah, but even if it's 1 to 28, that difference is almost 10%. And if you added 10% onto schools' budgets, make a big difference. So yeah, but I'm happy with ANSI, but if we could have that historically, that'd be fine.
Thank you, Councillor Aled.
Thank you. It is a huge challenge for the council. There's no doubt about this, and I know the terminology around the fully funded. However, when you look at the actuals, the bottom line on the spreadsheet, the actual outturn is a deficit of £2 million for the last financial year. So whether it's fully funded or not, it's still a deficit of £2 million. I know that includes that's a net position, so it will include some slippage within reserves of some schools as well. But the Appendix B, and thank you officers for producing Appendix B, it does show the trend, a serious trend. However, the forecast for this current financial year does indicate a little bit of good news. It seems to be stabilizing. Whether that actually plays out in at the end of the financial year, we'll see. But it has been a significant increase, over £5 million between in the last 4 years, increase in the total deficits of schools, and they lie mainly in high schools. And we know the challenges that the high schools face on their budgets and their standards as well. So what impact is this budget deficits having on the impact on what impact is that budget deficits having on the standards within our schools? I'm really concerned about. There's a strong relationship there, I fear. I don't know whether the portfolio holder would wish to comment on that. And we're asking the schools to do the impossible at the high school level.
Councillor James, James has got his hand up. Councillor Elliott.
Okay. And while James is on speaking, when was the last time a high school got a clear bill of health from Eston? Clean bill of health from Eston inspection?
To answer the second question, I don't know the exact time. Well, we've had high schools coming out of special measures.
Yeah, no. From the initial inspection, coming out with a clean bill of health.
Right, I'd have to ask our officers to check back without wishing to make a stab in the dark. So, excuse me, I just ask officers if they could provide that information. On your main point, I'm in complete agreement with you. It's some while since I was a secondary school governor, but I was a vice chair governor for many years, and I know how difficult it is to set budgets. These tables are telling us something. They are telling us that it's two possibilities, isn't it? The governing bodies of all of our secondary schools are feckless spendthrifts, or we're not giving them enough money. And haven't been for some time, and I tend to the latter. And the reason we're not giving them enough, are not able to give them enough money, is because, as I refer back to my original comments, is that whilst there is probably enough money within the system to provide a good level of education and produce balanced budgets across our schools, the way that we are carving the global pie up is not doing that, because we are through things like the small schools allowance having to spend too much money keeping a lot of relatively small schools open, and not able therefore to fund the secondary system as well as we'd like to. Now, does it affect outcomes? Of course it does. It's bound to. It is bound to be the case that schools in the secondary sector are not doing as much as they would like to do to maximise the learning opportunities for their students. That as night follows day, that must be the case. Now, I know that Councillor Gareth Jones is Chair of Governors at Schools Callan Cymru, and they've managed to set a balanced budget, and I congratulate them for that this year. But what have they had to do to achieve that? What opportunities has the school foregone in order that they're not that they're then able to set a balanced budget and stabilise the deficit position? That's what worries me as portfolio holder, and that's why I've been very clear that there has to be a pretty radical change to the structure of our school system in the county, and it will involve some horribly painful decisions if we are going to stabilise the financial position of our schools and maximise the learning outcomes from the system. I'm absolutely clear about that, but it will involve significant change, and politically and practically very, very difficult, and very difficult for the communities affected. But unless we can find a significant amount of extra money to go into the system, and it would be many, many, many millions of pounds, that I fear is the prospect facing future councils, and this one to a degree, but it's really starting to bite now, isn't it? That there will come a point when the net figure for primary sector will fall into deficit as well, if we do not take that action. And I'm, you know, I know that Councillor Allard has been very clear about this point over many years, and he's absolutely correct, and I completely agree with him. It's not something I want to say as a portfolio holder. You know, none of us came into this business to make the sort of changes that I'm referring to willingly, because it's so incredibly difficult and very, very difficult for communities affected. But we need, I think, as members now need to face up to this. I don't know how many more of these reports we can receive before we actually finally accept the inevitable that we have to make those radical changes. So I agree with you, Alid, 100%.
Can I just come back on that slightly? It's not an issue just of school size in the primary sector, it's also in the secondary sector. And Cabinet have taken a decision to open a new high school, a very, very small high school. And, you know, so whether I can't agree that.
Can I just ask if anybody, sorry, Councillor Alden, sorry, Chair, can I just ask if you're not speaking, can you turn your microphone off, please? Because we're getting some disturbance. Thank you.
Go on, Councillor Allard. If you can make your point, comments in a generic way, that would be great. But yeah, that'll be great.
No. Recent Cabinet decisions have been going against the thrust of what Councillor James has just said. When a new high school is
members, Kath made an appeal. We're still getting some background noise off somebody, so if you can have a go at your microphones, it'd be very appreciative. We're having difficulty picking up Councillor Allard. Go on, Councillor Allard. Try again.
I'm not sure what you picked up. But it's important that the Cabinet acknowledge that they are going against what Councillor James has just said around transformation, and what levels of saved money through the transformation process has been fed back into the budget in this current year as well. Thank you.
Nancy has her hand up, and Dr. Richard is also.
Chair, I don't know if Dr. Richard wants to come in before me.
Chair, I was going to just respond to Councillor Allard's question around ESTA inspections. So you're right to note, Councillor Allard, we've had a number of schools come out to the statutory category, but you asked what school has been inspected and not a re-inspection. So that would be Crickhowell. So that school didn't have any follow-up. However, 6 recommendations following the inspection. So, a lot of work to do in the school, which the school are committed to doing, and they're planning precisely for improvement and working well with their school improvement advisor and the wider service. But it was Crickhowell, no follow-up, but 6, substantial recommendations for the school to address.
Yeah, I was asking for one with a clean bill of health. Going back before your time, I'm guessing, Richard.
I would be very surprised if there are any school inspections without a recommendation from the inspectorate.
Right, Nancy, do you want to come in there? I've got James with his hand up as well. We'll take James first, and then we'll go to Nancy.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I can't agree with the point that the Council made that the decisions Cabinet is taking or has taken is running against what I've said. There have been a number of, alas, there have had to be a number of school closures in this council term, there will have to be more to come in future council terms. There's no question about that. We're facing a situation where we have a reducing number of pupils in the county, alas, due to demographic change, and we're having to spend more and more money on a system. Now, those two things are not. It's an oxymoron, almost, isn't it? We can't go on doing that because it is not financially sustainable over the long term. The point he's making, I think, is that the council will have to look at its secondary school estate as well, and I agree that it will have to. At the moment, the concentration has been on rationalising the primary sector because, frankly, there are educational reasons for doing so as well, in the sense that there are a number of primary schools most of our primary schools have multiple year groups, and the evidence actually is that internationally and within the UK is that education conducted through single year groups in schools is generally speaking produces better outcomes. Not always, but that is in general terms the case. So we're never going to get to that situation, I think, in this county, but because of the sparsity of the population and the rurality of it. But we do need to rationalise the system and minimise the number of schools that are operating with multiple year groups if we can. And as I just said, that will involve very painful decisions. On the issue of what's been recycled in this financial year, there is a figure. I have it in my head. I have a figure. I hesitate to say it because I think it will be wrong. So I'm going to ask Nancy to produce that figure and see if I'm right.
Okay, we've had quite a bit of political conversation there, which is absolutely fine because it's a great to understand the school estate. So we're going to go to Nancy and then move on to Councillor Clare. So Nancy first.
Thank you, Chair. So just to pick up on the point Councillor Allard made around the reinvestment, so that was £500,000. So £500,000 was put towards the secondary changes that were consulted on, which saw an additional £1.8 million invested on top of pay and price pressures into the secondary formula. And also, Chair, if I could just pick up on Councillor Allard's comment around the deficit, just to be clear for everybody, the £2 million, obviously, in-year deficit in 25-26 will be schools spending surpluses as well. So it is the net position, which does then forecast to improve for 26-27, and obviously will be attributable to both schools taking action and the extra investment that was put in to the formula. Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. Councillor Clare.
Thank you, Chair. I want to go back to a point that Nancy made earlier on about how the funding formula is worked up, and I want to go back to those principles. And forgive me if I should know this already, but I don't. Are those reviewed annually, or I know they go out to consultation, but one of the concerns I had about the last funding formula tweak was that we, as a scrutiny committee, we repeatedly asked for anonymised examples of running real world examples through that formula so that we could understand the changes. And I'm not aware that we ever had that, and I'm still not quite clear on what basis, going back to Councillor Lucy's point about schools understanding the impact, is we need to be involved at those principal stages in terms of being, so we make sure that we're working toward delivering the objectives that we've set out. And I'm just a little bit confused about that process, whether it's annual, whether it's something else, and whether or not we can factor in proposed changes so that we're making a fully informed decision before we sign off on some of those principles from a scrutiny point of view.
Nancy.
Yeah, so Councillor Clare, in terms of the formula, to be honest with you, I would say we review it most years. But it is really, if you are making significant changes, what we've got to be mindful of as a local authority is when you are making significant changes and potentially mostly phasing in changes, that you can't have too much flux in the system all the time. So we have had a couple of years where we've left a fallow year just while the changes bed in, and obviously then as part of the review work we would then review the impact of those changes. So if I can just take you through, Councillor Clare, so Schools Budget Forum oversee the formula work, and they're obviously a statutory body committee that we have to have. So we stand up schools formula review group following discussions with them, and there obviously will be items that come forward from the schools forum and from officers where we want to review. So it's not a whole scale review. We have done them in years gone by when we converted to more per pupil formula in 21-22. But since then, we've focused on additional learning needs, and that was introduced in 2024 on a phase basis, 50-50. And then obviously the areas we wanted to focus on and took to the formula review group in 25-26 for implementation in April 26 were top-ups and making sure that there was no lump sums effectively, and everything had an updated basis for for how the funding got to schools so that we're transparent as possible, which actually feeds really well into the schools funding regulations changes that are happening now, are going to be put in place now from February, April 27. So it's just to make sure we've got all that transparency behind any lump sums as well. But in terms of the process then, we would go back to Schools Budget Forum with a set of proposals, and obviously speaking to corporate leadership team as well around the update of where we've got to with our work. If we do decide to go forward with a consultation, that normally starts in the autumn term. And depending on the significance of the changes, could last anytime between 4 to 6 weeks. Then we go into a position where we'd get the information together and we go back to Schools Budget Forum, Cabinet, CLT. And then what we did this year is we timed the scrutiny meeting on it with the alignment to the budget process, because obviously it was there was a bid in there for additional funding, which obviously had to align with the Cabinet's draft budget and obviously then sign off. So scrutiny obviously then make recommendations from that. And we've got formula working groups where, well, actually we have got a scrutiny member on the formula working group, but obviously as a governor anyway. So yeah, that's the process. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. I believe that takes us to Councillor Bryn. Hello, Bryn. Hello, Bryn.
Diolch yn yeah, can you hear me?
Just about. You're a little bit
can you hear me?
intermittent, but let's see how it goes.
Yeah, I'll leave the video off. You know what I look like. It's hopeless. Okay, sorry. Just to go back to Nancy's explanation earlier on about the funding.
Okay, Councillor Bryn, you appear to have dropped away. Just giving him a second there just to see if we can establish a connection. Councillor Gareth, step in with your point, please. Microphone, Gareth.
Do apologise. Yeah, thank you, Chair. I got 3 points, if I may. Nancy said about the 500,000 that's being reinvested. I just wondered how many schools closures does that 500,000 relate to? That's question one. The second one is, I'm aware that the IBA process for funding coming into the authority is unhypothecated, but I wonder, could Nancy give us an indication how close the delegated budget and central retained budget for education is in line with the IBA figures for education? And the third question, under section 3.4 of the report, there it's mentioned that 595,000 from the contingency budget was funded to the schools. Two questions there. Do we have the figures for the contingency put into schools for the last 2 years in addition to this one? And the second part of that is, how was that £595,000 allocated across the schools?
Okay, lots of questions there. Nancy, happy to have a go at them?
I can come off mute, Chair. Yes, thank you. So, Councillor Gareth, if it's okay, I will take that question away because I haven't got figures around the total schools that feed into it today. Sorry. So
that's right. That's fine.
I couldn't cover that off in the meeting. But in terms of the contingency, there was nothing given last year.
Okay.
Okay, because there was a lot of amendments made in terms of pupil number changes and special school number alterations in 24-25, and how it was allocated was on a per pupil basis, the 595 in this year the year that we've just currently finished.
Okay, and the first question?
The IBA.
No, around the 500,000. How many school closures is that?
Oh, I'll have to come back to you. Sorry on that one. I think I thought that was what. I will have to. I haven't got those figures to hand today. I'm sorry.
My assumption is that the savings per small school closure is around 100k. Is that about right?
It can vary between 50 to 100,000. What we do is we allocate any.
So if it's between 50 and 100,000, we're talking about 8 or 9 school closures, and we cover that 500,000.
Yeah.
So if we've got an overspend of 2 million per year, we're then looking at, on what James has just said, we're looking for a further 20 small school closures.
You're starting hairs racing there, Councillor
I
Gareth.
know I am.
Go on,
Can I
Nancy.
come back in there, Chair, though, just on Gareth's point? I think we've got to be careful when we say overspending with the £2 million, sorry, in the report, because it's not overspending. It's some schools using their surpluses, which we challenge them to do that, because we need to ensure they're spending it in the right way, working with our school improvement advisors to support the priorities in our schools, and that Welsh Government require us to be really clear around asking schools about what they are doing with their surpluses, which we write out to schools to do. We've written out to 38 of them this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. We go to Councillor Angela. I'll reply to Councillor Bryn.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I know we're going into a confidential session in a minute, so I don't know if these questions are right now, but I'm just thinking about the deficit budgets. When we have a school closure with a deficit, I'm wondering what happens. Where is that money coming from? How does it get written off? What's the process there? And I'm just thinking about looking at the charts here on Appendix A and B. It looks like we do have a worsening financial situation for our schools, and those of us at governors know it is really difficult to balance the books. It's really difficult, but we work with the local authority, and again, I suppose it's a similar question before. How do we know the work that you're doing? Because you are working really hard with our schools. You're looking at pupil numbers, your budgeting meetings. We're looking at staffing, and staffing really is the biggest cost to all of our schools. How do we know the work that you are doing is effective enough, and how do we know that work that we are doing as governors, and I include myself in that, are we qualified for the job in hand? Are we doing a good enough job? Because if we're going to be ultra critical of ourselves, this doesn't look like it, does it? And I know it's not that simplistic, but what are we missing?
Yeah, can I add to that, because I think Angela raises an important point. So I pulled up last year's figures, and there's obviously it's obviously a worsening picture, but there is some plus points on with certain schools making some real good progress. I did try and dig it out last night, but I'd like to go back to the Andrew Williams report, and I don't know what the report was headed, but he obviously did a deep dive into our schools and came out with some really, really good advice. I'm assuming some schools took that advice. So add to Councillor Angela's question, how confident are we that more than the few schools that are seeing improvement are acting on that advice, and the governors have the capability to make the changes that are expected? Where we lost my screen now. Who? Please speak up.
Thank you, Chair.
Well,
it's Richard. I'll come in. Thanks so much. Just on that. I think Councillor Angela makes a really important point around, are we having impact, and how are we working with our schools to live within their means? And I acknowledge how challenging it is. I think, there's multiple bits of work that are taking place and needs to continue taking place. So, we're rolling out the professional learning for governors and for head teachers around financial management. I think that's a really important piece of the puzzle. The work that is now happening between school improvement advisors and the finance team to have that finance team around the school approach is another important way that we're working with schools. And equally, when schools aren't working with us, you'll note in the report that we are not shy in, where appropriate, using our statutory powers of intervention. The report notes warning notices and notices of concern, etc. So I think there are multiple prongs to the approach which we're taking. What we are seeing, and we do see with the schools that we work with, in some an improving picture. In our secondaries, that directly relates to the work that the Chair mentioned around the integrated curriculum and financial planning. And that's not just a one-off event. That is working with the school to make sure that they are working 12 months in advance of the future curriculum offer and the timetable to make sure that they can manage their finances effectively. Because, Councillor Andrew, as you said, the main proportion of the spend goes on our staffing. So it is a challenging picture. I would like to recognise just the way that our schools and our governing bodies are working with us at the moment. And I think it's a relentless task working with our schools in the close way that we are. But we have to acknowledge that it's challenging. Thank you.
Dr. Richard, you mentioned warning notices, etc., etc., etc. Obviously, we have a scheme for financing schools. The one thing that glares out at me is that, you know, the terms and conditions of that financing schools is schools shouldn't be in deficits over 3 years. I appreciate that there is an opportunity to with the agreement of the one pipe on opposite to extend that offer, but we do have schools out there that have had long-term deficit budgets. So are we confident that we're working within the scheme that we're obliged to work within?
Yes, we are working within the scheme and the financial regulations. But again, you know, just to speak plainly about it, if we look at some of the historic deficits in some of our secondary schools, which are large, you know, there is a question: how will those schools ever be able to pay back such significant deficits? You know, even if our schools are bringing in a surplus, we still need to consider that surplus, where appropriate, being reinvested in the school to continue their education improvement journey. So, yeah, I think there is a financial elephant in the room in terms of the size of the deficits in our secondary schools, and that's the fact of the situation.
Thanks, Dr. Richard. The question has to be asked. Nancy.
Yeah, so just to come back in, Chair, on Councillor Angela's point around the school deficits. So any school deficits and surpluses, Councillor Angela, on closure, go back into a held on our council balance sheet. So if you, in the report, if you refer to table, I think it's table 1, you will be able to see in there. So under section 3.1, there is the school balances, and then you'll see underneath them we've got a closed school stroke bank account allocation as well. So there's £444,000 deficit held on the balance sheet in respect of schools where there's been deficits written off. But if there's surpluses also, they go down there too, against the balance sheet as well. But obviously, if we have got surpluses ahead of school closures, those schools are all on restrictions either way. We try to work with them as best we can in terms of you know, the ending of the school effectively. Yeah, that's where it's held currently on the balance sheet.
If I can just come back there, I get that on paper. That's where it's, you know, recorded on paper. But in terms of the actual money, that was actual money that a school overspent at some point. So, like, how does the council pay that debt back? Where does it come from? Does it come out of all the rest of the school's budget? Or does it come out of a council pot somewhere?
No.
You know, it is actual real money, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, it's held as the school balances are, I suppose, in terms of the accounts. And when you know, obviously what we don't want to do is that to increase every year when we are doing transformation proposals. We want our schools in a good bill of health in terms of their overall financial position. But unfortunately, there are things that happen in schools where there are deficits on closure. And for us, it's about trying to minimise that as much as possible. And that's the approach we've taken in the past, is to hold it there. So it is clearly recognised in the accounts, but you are quite right, it is just held there at the moment. In order to reduce that, it would either be that we'd have to identify money in the budget to write that off completely, or we hold it there, and as schools do close, if there are balances held, surpluses, then we would use that to reduce it. But yeah, at the moment it is just held there like the rest of the balances, without using any other funding from any other schools or the council in general. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Allen.
Thank you. Can I just push back at what Nancy said earlier, where she's saying that the use of surpluses accounted for some of that £2 million? Well, £500,000 is schools with deficits already increasing their deficits. So at least £500,000 is due to that. And also the number of schools in cumulative deficit, primary schools in cumulative deficit, has doubled from 11 to 20 schools over the past 12 months. And that trend is likely to continue into future years. The position within high schools and all through schools remains stable, with just 1, 2, 3 being in a black, all the others continuing to be in red as in the previous year. Thank you.
Nancy.
Yeah, no to Councillor Ali's point in terms of that, and reflected in the report the increase from 21 deficits overall that were planned and the actual 31. And but we are working with those schools around that. So in the report, what we do note is we've got 26 schools projecting to set a deficit in 26-27. So some of those schools where they did end up in an in-year overspend in 25-26 are paying that back immediately to bring that number down to 26. But Councillor added, we are working obviously on the remaining 26. Some are licensed within the 3 years, Councillor Gwynfor, that you mentioned, and then the remaining have to be classified and licensed under the scheme, of which 11 have all got in-year underspends over a period of time, paying back the deficit, and 9 were our immediate focus, where they held in-year deficits in 26-27, or they didn't have in-year surpluses across the whole of the plan that they provided. So we're working with those schools, and their recovery plans are due back today. And I have to say, in terms of the primary schools, where we were requesting recovery plans, there's been some significant work being done by both officers and predominantly the school in addressing that, and addressing those deficits. So I know that from some of the governing body meetings that have happened since they've had their letters, we've got schools where the number of schools in deficit for the primary will come down. Unfortunately, with the deficits in secondary, the level is thus that it will, as Dr. Richards said, take a period of time to repay. But it's about balancing what's required at the school versus an appropriate level of payback, working with the school improvement team, Councillor Alid, to just address that. But monitoring is key, and the end of year position is key then when we come to it as well. Thank you.
I accept that, but I was just reflecting the actual positions beginning of last financial year and the end of the last financial year. Thank you.
Mark's coming in to help as well, so come on, Mark.
I was just going to sort of reiterate a lot of what Nancy has said, that when a school does fall into a deficit situation, that we have got robust plans in place for a repayment schedule that is both stringent in terms that we will get the money back, but allows that flexibility for the school to carry on with their curriculum offer. But I think it's also very important to bear in mind that the financial situation of a school is not linear. That particularly in small schools, a prolonged period of staff absence, which may not be covered by insurance, additional supply costs that may be as a result of that, can have a huge impact on the budget of a school. As we know, staffing is the predominant outspend of most schools. So we have to be rigorous and stringent, but there has to be a little bit of flexibility, and situations can change very, very quickly, and we have to be mindful of that. So increasingly, the role of the school improvement advisor is to have close consultation with head teachers and governing bodies, so that they're aware and could foresee when situations like this arise, so that these issues can be raised in our team around the school meeting, so that we can then pre-plan to put the appropriate measures in place to ensure that financial probity is maintained.
Thank you, Mark. Members, I don't know if you're agreeable with the suggestion, we've got 30 minutes left of the meeting. We've got a confidential item coming up, which is similar to what we've been discussing. So with your agreement, I'd move to item 10, which is scrutiny recommendations from our discussion, which are open discussions. If there's some scrutiny recommendations in relation to that, I think now is the time to deal with them. And then we can still go on to our exempt item where we could continue discussion if there is some, because I'm quite anxious that we do finish at 12:30 due to other people's commitments. Would that be an acceptable direction?
Gwynfor, can I have an answer to my question first?
All right, I haven't seen it, Bryn. Let me just have a quick look now.
It's in the chat, Chair.
Right, so Nancy explained funding was applied to enable option class sizes based on 25 per group. So cohorts between 0 and 20 would receive funding for one group, 25 to 50 would have two groups, 50 to 75 get funding for three groups, 75 to 100, four groups, etc. Can you just confirm that that's the Bryn's assumption in the chat there is correct, Nancy?
Yeah, I probably be best to do some worked examples, Chair, for Councillor Bryn, because obviously it's a little bit more complicated in secondary with regards to the options, but the ratio that drives the funding is on a 1 to 20, and then it's an assumed over 9 periods a week in terms of how that's allocated between the core and the options. So that the basis of 1 to 20 is what we've applied to drive the additional funding through, but it would be good just to do some work in terms of what that drives in terms of actual teachers, if you see what I mean. But yes, that's the principle is correct. That's what the funding has been changed to, from 1 to 25 for options to 1 to 20. It's just how that then materializes once you build up the whole funding for the core subjects as well.
Okay. Yeah, Brendan, if you can speak, please do.
Yeah, that's okay. So it's actually you're actually saying that your name, when you say 1 to 20, are you talking about whole year groups? Are you just talking about GCSE option levels then? Are you talking
options only, Councillor Bryn?
That's it. So your general year group sizes are aimed at what then?
1 to 30.
1 to 30. Okay, 1 to 30 for core subjects, if you like, and 1 to 20 for option subjects.
In years 10 and 11, it is different in Key Stage 3 again.
Yes, yeah, that's absolutely fine. Now I won't ask you for that much detail now, but that's the principle basically. 1 to 20 for option subjects in Key Stage 4, and 1 to 30 for core subjects in Key Stage 4. Yeah.
Okay, diolch, Bryn, and thank you, Nancy. Right, so I'm going to move on to item 10 on the agenda, scrutiny recommendations on the school outrun positions. I actually didn't pick up too many recommendations there. We had questions and they were answered, but I'm happy to take any recommendations that you would like to put in relation to this. Obviously, go on.
Yes, Chair. So I think really our recommendation is just that plea to all officers to work as closely with the schools. They're telling us what they're doing. So there was that talk of a rollout to professional learning for head teachers and governors in terms of finance. So, I'd like to see that strengthened, and really that everybody, and include myself, as I say, I'm a school governor, are encouraged to attend that, because it is getting more difficult, isn't it, to balance these budgets. So
it is. There'll obviously be notes surrounding our discussions anyway, and it will note our concerns and everything. Yeah, but I'm happy to add that as a recommendation, Angela.
I'm not sure whether they're recommendations, Chair, but there's the data that Nancy was going to provide to us, the number of schools closures related to the 500,000, the IBA against actual budget, and the third one was, can't think now, I just had it in my head, I can't think what the third one was. Oh yeah, the changes to the PTR, the pupil-teacher ratio over a period of time.
Okay, yeah, no, I'm happy to put those things, and we'll consider the notes in detail and draw them up so that it notifies our concerns and our support in relation to that. Okay, I'm going to take you to item 11. If anybody would like to, you can see the documentation in relation to going to confidential session. If somebody'd like to propose that we go into confidential session in relation to item 12, Councillor Gareth, and a
I'm happy
seconder.
to propose. Yeah.
Yeah, and a seconder, please, just to be correct.
Happy to do so.
Councillor Allett has seconded, and silence will indicate that we're all in favour. That will take us into item 12, school budgets, and we'll just give an opportunity to stop broadcasting, and we'll go into confidential session.